Alexis Carrel was a French surgeon and scientist who was born on June 28, 1873, in Saint-Léon, France. He was the oldest of three children born to Marie-Dominique Auguste Carrel, a seamstress, and Auguste Carrel, a watchmaker and goldsmith. At 5 years of age his father dies, leaving only his mother to raise him and his two siblings. Carrel received his early education in Lyon, where he excelled in science and mathematics. A medical student 21 years of age, when pursuing his degree he witnessed disturbing news that his French president Sandi Carnot was assassinated in 1894. The attack was made by an Italian anarchist with a dagger tearing his portal vein leading to his death. At the time no surgeon knew how to suture veins or arteries. Working at his mother's lace factory, which made him familiar with techniques and was convened that it could be applied to sewing blood vessels. While completing his medical studies he practiced embroidery with his mother until he became a proficient lace maker. Later he would implement new revolutionizing medical procedures in the years ahead. He graduated from University of Lyon with Bachelor of Letters degree 1889, followed by the next year Bachelor of Science degree, and in 1900 by a medical degree. He taught anatomy and operative surgery at Lyons, beginning experimental research there. Carrel's particular interest in vascular surgery however met with little approval at Lyons. In 1902 he developed the technique of triangulation in approximating blood vessels, whereby three stay sutures were placed at equal distances from one another along the circumference of the divided vessels. He insisted on extreme gentle handling of tissues. He noted that the main cause of previous failure in suturing vessels together was the formation of clots. To address this issue, he used atraumatic small round needles. While most of his contemporaries used large thick absorbable sutures, he used extremely fine sutures made of silk lubricated with Vaseline to stitch vessels together. He was known to grasp the needle in his fingers instead of using a needle holder. In 1904 he would leave France and migrated to Canada, and a year later to the United States. He then there accepted the offer to work at the Hull Laboratory at the University of Chicago, where he co-authored 28 papers with physiologist Charles-Claude Guthrie. Topics of the papers included use of vein grafts in the arterial system, replantation of limbs, transplantation and tissue preservation techniques. Their work showed that venous autograft placed in the arterial system became arterialized and developed intimal hyperplasia, whereas arteries grafted to the venous system became thin-walled and venous in nature. He also developed the Carrel patch used in kidney transplantation, whereby a patch of aortic wall containing the orifice of the renal artery is sutured in place to the recipient artery to avoid thrombosis risk posed by small vessel anastomosis. Guthrie's profound physiology work on vascular surgery should have won him the Nobel Prize. Eventually the committee gave it to one of his colleagues instead. In the case of such controversial experiments that he stitched together a two-headed dog. Carrel's suture was being widely used on human patients at this time. His research also laid the foundation for successful transplantation of human organs, which became feasible later in the 20th century. In 1906 Carrel joined the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research in New York, where he stayed in full-time research for the rest of his medical career. It is at this time he was one of the first to develop cell culture techniques, proudly maintaining a cell line derived from chicken heart cells for 35 years, well beyond the life span of the original chicken. The culture techniques used to generate the immortal chick heart tissue were first described in his paper The Permanent Life of Tissues Outside of the Organism. Also the same year his pioneering methods of suture and transplantation, mostly in animal, receiving the Nobel Prize in 1912. The chick heart tissues in this early stage of in vitro culturing continued to pulsate. Before Carrel submitted his paper for publication, the chick heart tissue had been growing and pulsating for about 3 months, from 17 January to the 16th of March 1912. In his paper, On the Permanent Life of Tissues Outside of the Organism, hypothesized that the lifespan of cultured tissues could be lengthened indefinitely and tissues should intrinsically be able to maintain permanent life in vitro under ideal culturing methods. Carrel was able to keep the heart tissue healthy and alive because the mineral solution nourishing the cells and their replacement of fluids every day ensured that all the cellular waste material were removed. One of the secrets then to health and longevity is not only proper nutrition but also removal of metabolic waste. Mineral baths would regularly eliminates waste products of cellular metabolism. He gets married to Madame de la Mairie in Paris late 1913, they would have no children. At the beginning of the First World War in 1914 he served as major in the French Army Medical Corps. In those war years he helped to develop the Carrel-Dakin method of treating wounds with antiseptic fluids to prevent infections. Carrel and Henry Dakin devised an exacting protocol for treating battle-wounded soldiers. In doing this day and night with an antibacterial solution containing an oxidizing agent sodium hypochlorite known as the Carrel-Dakin solution. Rubber irrigation tubes are used to release Duncan liquid within the wound. This was a far better method of sterilizing wounds, a system that would irrigate wounds with a sterilizing solution saving soldiers' lives and limbs from amputation. At the end of the war in 1919 Carrel returned to the Rockefeller Institute, New York, pursuing further in his career in medical research. He was given great autonomy to organize surgical rooms as he liked, such as dark operating rooms. The floors, walls, and ceiling were painted black, even cabinets and tables. The only source of illumination was a large skylight directly above the table. He states too much light inhibits the activity of the brain, for black cut-out-the-glare surgical gowns were better than the traditional white ones as illuminating dust. Well into the 1920s, including the culture of embryonic heart cells that was maintained continuously for over years to come. It was around this time, early 1930s, the two giants would collaborate revolutionary device in medicine. Charles Lindbergh, world famous for being the first to cross the Atlantic Ocean in his transatlantic flight from New York to Paris in his monoplane, Spirit of St. Louis. It was at this time Lindbergh's sister-in-law was suffering from heart failure. He wondered whether an artificial pump could be made to circulate the blood. Their doctor suggested a researcher at the Rockefeller Institute that may be able to help. The two collaborated. Carrel had an interest in perfusion but unsuccessful. Lindbergh drew up some sketches of such a device after constructing several models that failed, but in 1935 Lindbergh was finally successful. The two worked together until 1938, undertaking far-reaching experimental program, aimed at the cultivation of whole organs. Enabling to keep such organs as the thyroid gland, kidney, and hearts alive and functioning for days or weeks. Dozens of pumps were built and distributed to laboratories around the world, and thousands of experiments were carried out. Carrel's naturally religious, even mystical, temperament led him to speculate on the great problems of human destiny. This would be expressed in his widely read book, Man the Unknown, released in 1935. In 1939 Carrel reached the Rockefeller Institute's mandatory retirement age and was refused special exception. In his anger he denounced the institute, closed his laboratory, and returned to his home country of France in July 1939. 2 months later Germany would invade Poland, starting the Second World War. Months later Germany would invade and conquered France in 1940. And installed a puppet government in the town of Vichy. Known for his previous achievements, the next few years would reveal the darker side of his career. As a theorist and practitioner of eugenics he defends the need to sterilization, and to eliminate defectives, and criminals from society. In 1941 he accepted a grant from Vichy France to set up an institute in Paris, which was in the German-occupied zone, to examine the problem. Interactions with Vichy, and the German government, and his own writings that reflected his authoritarian attitudes and mysticism, he was widely believed to be a Nazi collaborator. After the liberation of France in 1944, he was removed from his responsibilities at the institute and placed under guard while evidence of his collaboration was sought by prosecutors. He was widely vilified under charges of being a Nazi apologist, racist, and eugenicist. Becoming sullen and depressed, he had a series of heart attacks, and died of a myocardial infarction in November 1944. No hard evidence of collaboration has ever been found, and it seems likely that the charges against him were grossly exaggerated. History would see groups led a highly successful campaign, stripping the Alexis Carrel's name off streets and buildings of public honor. As for the immoral chicken heart, Carrel's two technicians soon left the Rockefeller Institute shawling its fate. An American company used the chick heart tissue cultures to test the toxicity of drugs and germicides. The last batch of chick heart tissue cultures was discarded in 1946, 2 years after Carrel's death. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to support this channel.